Special assessments for fire hydrants. That is also, water, sewer, stormwater, all those things are probably something that you could do in legal theory, what it would look like in the ground. You would need a study for all of these things. You need an expert to go through, look at what roads you want to do, what the cost of those roads, and how the best way to apportion it. The good thing about special assessments is that all of the exemptions from ad valorem taxation do not apply to special assessments. So you do have a more broad distribution among the property owners than you do with our ad valorem tax system.
So it's not based on taxable valuation that the property.
No, it is not. It is not based on value. It can have a value component if that is a desirable way to apportion it. With road assessments, I heard front feet. You can use front feet. It's a little bit of an administrative burden to use front footage. And there are a lot of other acceptable ways to apportion a road assessment. One of the more common is to look at trip generation. You've got very robust data sources out there that show the number of trips that certain types of property uses put on the roads. And you can create ratios with trip generations and get to an ERU where you would have all benefited residential probably paying the same. But then say a fast food restaurant that has a lot more trips and puts a lot more use on those roads would probably pay a little bit more than those residences. So there's a lot of different ways you can slice that up once you get into the nuts and bolts of it. Let's see, any other? There are other questions.
You want me to?
Yeah.
I'm going to let Jay talk a little bit about the financing of it.
Yes.
Yeah, Jay Glover from Public Financial Management. We're the city's financial advisor on debt-related matters. So in terms of legality of special assessments, as Heather mentioned, they're perfectly legal to do under certain circumstances. The one issue I will raise is the ability to use those assessments to secure debt. That can be problematic. I'm not going to say it's impossible. Many people do it, but it depends on the underlying credit quality of those individuals and businesses paying those assessments. So financing markets will go in and look at the underlying properties to assess their willingness and ability to pay those assessments. So to the extent they're collected via the property tax bill, obviously that will increase incentive to pay and increase the credit quality of any financing. But given the makeup of the city, I would think it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to secure a financing solely by special assessments. Many special assessments that do get done in a financing term will have some sort of credit support behind them, i.e. a general fund credit support or something like you've mentioned, a covenant to budget and appropriate, which in this case might or might not be feasible given the city's general fund situation. So while assessments are perfectly legal to finance these types of projects, I will caution the city that the feasibility of getting a financing done secured by those assessments will be difficult. And sitting here today, I can't say yes or no, because we need to look at what properties are being assessed and the credit quality of those properties to determine if a loan, a bank, capital markets would actually give you money with that security source.
So just to recap, academically, there's no question that assessments are something as a tool. The ability to come up with a way to implement that associates the value of the improvement to the specific property, given the types of properties, the varying projects throughout the city that range from totally new infrastructure that was never installed, total reconstruction, some street overlays, and maybe a sidewalk. The ability to do that in such a way where you've got different kinds of uses on a block, commercial, different zoning, duplexes, and it's a real mishmash. That can be problematic in trying to implement. It's not impossible, but it's problematic potentially. And then you have a concern about the ability, if we were able to come up with that formula, to actually secure debt at at least a reasonable rate so it's financially sound.
Yes, typically when you put an assessment in place, it's going to be for a period of time, 10, 20 years. So you're not going to use that money over time to make the improvements. you're going to want the money up front to make those improvements, thus you're going to have to go out for a bond. And that's where I say the difficulty is going to be. Will the bank lend you money based on the credit quality of those assessments over the 10 or 20-year period? I think that will be very difficult in this circumstance.
And let me just clarify, doing a road assessment and getting to that ultimate parcel apportionment and whatever the property pays is not necessarily problematic. I just want it to be very clear that it's not going to be, let's look at how many parcels we have in the city and we're going to divide this pot of money by that number. It's not that simple.
How is it not that simple?
Because benefit per property is going to vary by use and what's physically there or not there, and the traffic that's associated with that particular road. Then you've got the type of project, that cost of that project has to be apportioned fairly because only certain numbers of properties are using them. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. I got a cool bird. Is that correct? It starts to become very difficult to actually implement when you start to come down to on my block.
I just wanted to be very specific because I think these are some of the questions and things that people need to hear, that why something was suggested or said you can and you can't, or why it's difficult or why it's not. The details are just as important.
And I also want to be clear, we're going to take these ideas and probably some other ones that have been talked about and pushed out there before, and we're going to hash through them all and really vet them well and push information back out, have some follow-up, presentations to the commission. There's also another meeting scheduled. We may have another one, but we want people to be completely understandable with what's in the realm of legal. What's legal, what these things look like, and how they would be implemented here if possible.
So, Vice Mayor?
Yeah. I just wanted to piggyback on the difficulty of the assessment. Like, I think we've heard it's feasible, it's possible. We may not be able to we may not be able to secure debt with that. But the other thing that we didn't say specifically, and I think I'm going to throw it out there, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but if I'm right, let's talk about it. Because of this type of a mechanism would probably generate a lawsuit from one or more of our property owners. And when that begins, and my point is, that's one of the real pitfalls. Even if we could do this, we'd probably never get it done because we'd be tied up in court for the next millennium. Am I incorrect on that?
Anyone with $400 can sue you. The bottom line is, if you were going to do a big assessment-backed bond issue with a backup covenant, however it's structured from a financing perspective, there is a validation procedure in Chapter 75 of Florida statutes that allows you to go to the court and ask them to bless your bond issue. Once that's done, it's bulletproof for the life of the bonds.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Michael Flack had a question. What is the city's credit rating?
We've been asked this a lot, and the answer is the same. The city currently has no debt in the general fund, so it's not rated. Is that their answer?
That's correct, yeah. The city has no general fund debt. The only debt the city has is on its water and sewer and electric utility system. So the general creditworthiness of the city, general obligation of the city, does not have a credit rating.
So how do we know what the paper is going to cost us?
Yeah, before you would actually go out with a general obligation bond deal, we would go to the credit markets and ask for a credit rating.
Can we do that now?
You can get an implied credit rating if you would like to, yes. They do provide ratings. It's called an implied credit rating or a SPUR. It's just an indicative rating as if the city did have general obligation bonds.
Is that possible?
Well, it is, but understand, when we were estimating debt, we had an estimated percentage in the calculations, and I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, what we do when we were planning for the original referendum is we used assumptions based on the then current market conditions, and are typically a little conservative when we're indicating interest rates, because we want to make sure that it's understood what the max millage rate impact would be on each citizen. The actual millage rate would be based on the actual borrowing rate once the deal is done. So originally there's estimates that are put in place, And then the actual millage rate is not done until the financing's done, and we know the actual debt service, so.
Because there's moving pieces, you borrow an amount, and then those numbers get backed in based on whatever your valuation is for that year. And we don't know what the valuation is going to be if y'all approve a bond, that's the way we go. Now it's kind of, it's hard to give those numbers. The fact of the matter is none of these things, none of these financings, none of the budget issues are easy, guys. I can't give you sound bites on any of this stuff that covers everything because it's not easy and it's very difficult. The job that these policymakers have in trying to run this city, because it's not just a city with a P&L statement. They have 8 different companies basically they run. The golf course is a business, the electric utility is a business, and all the money stays in those funds and it operates separately with all different regulations and rules. And none of this is easy to do. It's a big corporation. You are the shareholders and the owners, and you bear some responsibility to come to the meetings, to listen to how we do our budget. And I'll go ahead and address this money in the current budget. I can stand up here in my little bow tie and tell you, that's a laughable topic. And I came here 2.5 years ago because this city is financially in trouble. It is a mess, financially, okay? We're starting to see improvements. It is not that all of a sudden there's a windfall of money. You are climbing out of a deep hole. The reason we balanced the budget in the general fund this year is not because we magically brought a bunch of money to the city. There was one-time revenue cuts of almost $600,000 and one-time budget revenues and one-time budget cuts that we were able to realize, that we patched together the budget to make it balanced. Now we're working really, really hard to bring in some graphs and tools that are going to be consistent across all the funds. And I encourage you to come to the budget meetings and look at these graphs and start to understand, because it's going to be a lot easier than some of the information we put out, because it's been confusing. It's confusing for me, it's confusing for the commissioners sometimes, and it's confusing for y'all, because it's not easy to present it. So we're hoping that you all will start to see really how financially these things are operating. They're trending in the right direction. And we'll give you information to try to address this. Is there money in the current budget once you pay everything out that you're obligated to do? But I can tell you, you can find money in the budget. That's an easy thing to do. But you are going to have to make some tough decisions. You're going to have to cut off some major limbs to fund the kind of money that you would need to do the road programs, whatever size you would end up doing, just to catch up. So I don't mean to be bleak, but your city organization, the revenue coming in, and it's not very financially solvent right now. It will be in the future, is our goal, as we refill the city, as we get more shoulders to the wheel, as you see businesses return, the economic model starts to work locally. It can be sustainable, but we're not there. You're climbing out of the hole. Kind of went off on a topic there. Where were we?
No, I was answering some questions. Some more questions came in from
Okay.
the audience. Are we okay? Okay. One of them came, Mr. Ferner. Use alternative ways to fix infrastructure. No new taxes or bonds. Prioritize needs. Give the city time. Have values going up for more taxes. Apply for grants, state and federal. Take back the CRA. I don't want or like having a bond. Tax landlords more with so many rentals. And make all panhandle. I can't read that. Non-homesteaded rental property pay more taxes and ad valorem taxes. Most important, listen to the citizens and clean up blatant crime.
Non-homesteaded properties, just I want to clarify something. They pay the bulk of taxes from the residential component. 58% of the residential units are rentals. They pay more taxes than homesteaded properties in general, unless you live on a waterfront house or something like that. But for the most part, most of the structures in this town, they don't get the benefit of the homestead deductions. So they actually are, in a way, kind of help buoy the budget.
No, definitely. And then also, this question came in, why can't we have a hybrid financing plan with both special assessments for neighborhood streets and a bond for all collector and feeder roads? And that's exactly what we've been talking about. That's exactly what we've been talking about, correct?
Hybrids, I love hybrids.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, I mean, you could combine all 3 of these. If we're really looking at a financing method, you're talking about assessments, general fund, and GO. I mean, you could do any form, all of those, none of those, some of those. It really just, it's at your preference and what the city can afford. I will tell you that we talk a lot about interest rates. In the terms of credit spectrum, each one of those has a different credit quality and thus will carry a different interest rate if you go to finance those. At the top of the credit spectrum, you're talking about general obligation bonds. They're going to carry your highest credit rating because they're secured by ad valorem taxes collected via the property tax bill. So that's going to get your highest credit rating and your lowest interest rate. As you work down the spectrum, next would be the general fund in terms of credit quality, and the lowest would be special assessment. So just remember that as you work down the credit spectrum, it's going to increase the interest rate on the borrowing, thus increase the debt service, makes higher assessments, higher ad valorem taxes. So just keep that in mind as you're talking about the different financing methods. There are different costs associated with it depending on the credit quality of each one.
Okay, Phil Materio, what happens to the property on county and state roads like Dixie and Federal? Nothing. Nothing, yeah, exactly.
I mean, those are the responsibilities of the state, and we work with the MPO and.
The MPO, just as an aside from that,
But if you look at the conditions of Federal, Dixie, Lake, and Lucerne, compared to the city-owned and the streets you're responsible for, you can see the difference.
well, it's interesting because like Ms. Powell said earlier, one of the things, the projects we applied for grant-wise, Ms. Powell, was for Dixie Highway from 10th Avenue North to 6th Avenue South. There are not any projects or grants available for just, say, changing or paving a roadway. But there are for creating more pedestrian and bike-friendly. I mean, those are the types of grants that are coming. They're pushing for alternative forms of transportation. So in doing so, and that's what I've been working with the MPO on, and that's one of the projects that we're hopefully going to be bringing to the city in the coming months, is improving Dixie Highway from 10th Avenue North to 6th Avenue South by creating more walkable, bikeable, better parking, narrower roads with turn lanes, safer walking distance between it. And it's part of that funding that you can get through NPO for a different project, but also would solve our problems of creating, much better transportation and safety for our citizens, while also improving the thoroughfare into our city, since you have to dump down Dixie from 95. You just don't come straight into our downtown. So we are looking at sources like that, and that's going to be some big projects. West Palm Beach is doing it on their side. The MPO has funded some research and planning stages, and we're supposed to be next. As soon as I hear the definitive word that we are, and I'm hoping before the end of this year, that's going to be the start of a great new project for the city.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Matera?
The question wasn't what was going to happen to the roads. The question was for if we're going to assess properties that are on and assess them to the amount of frontage they have on roads, then do we lose all that property along Dixie Highway for assessments?
If a business fronts on a state road and uses it as its main access, would it be assessed? Would there be a benefit to it?
Yes.
Probably not, but really, that's.
It would be property specific, based on the access to the property. To get on most of the properties, you have to drive at least over a little bit of a side street to go into the parking lot. So it would be to a lesser extent, probably. Is that fair to say? Because it has to be a direct benefit to the properties in some fashion.
Okay, another question from Ms. McGivern. Sell some of the city's surplus foreclosed properties.
William, where's William? Is he still back there? How many surplus buildable lots do we have? Is it 26?
24.
24. Okay, when you go on POP and you pull the city of Lake Worth, you're going to see a lot of properties. There's a lot of properties. There's a lot that the utility zone, there's rights-of-ways, there's little places for transfer stations. But of properties that are out, that we foreclosed on, we have 24 right now. Okay. Are there any more in the works?
There's one that has a building on it, and the total assessed market value of the 26 properties is a little bit less than $500,000.
Okay. So you can see those things haven't.
Can you repeat that number? I couldn't hear.
You said that there's one building that
26 properties, and the total assessed value of all 26 of those properties is less than $500,000. Is that correct?
There are 26 properties that have been evaluated by the planning board and also presented in a workshop that could be deemed surplus. One has a fourplex on it in the historic district. It's the only one that has a building where we have a clear title. There are 3 properties we don't have clear title to, so we could not sell those. But the ones that could be sold, I think it's 25, and we determined the market value of those is right around $500,000.
Sure.
Could I ask you one more question? Do you know how many properties that have not been surplus by the commission do you know?
We have not surplus any properties officially since I've been with the city.
That wasn't my question. How many do you own that has not been surplus?
That's the answer to the question. We have not surplused officially any property since I've been with the city.
That answers, there's not a lot of.
I have a question here from Thomas. Is it Yakura? So I can't read. What happens when the city can't meet the payments for the general obligation bond?
You come and foreclose on all your properties and kick you out of the city.
Don't say that. Don't even joke about that.
I mean,
city
in
manager.
its simplest form, that would mean the city would be on default on its bonds, and then the bondholders would typically sue looking for repayment. However, with a general obligation bond deal, it's secured by the full faith and credit of the city. So the city would be forced to, levy an ad valorem millage on each citizen such that it meets its debt service obligation. So, as property values go down, that millage rate could go up. As property values go up, that millage rate would go down. That's why it's at the highest credit quality of the credit spectrum, because it's a full faith and credit obligation of the city, unlike a revenue bond that's secured by one specific revenue stream that the city might not have control over how it goes up and down, i.e. a sales tax. It's more economic driven.
But to clarify, and I was joking, the bond company's not going to come in and kick you out of your house and foreclose on it.
No, but you would be in a Detroit situation essentially, whereby you're in default, and then those bondholders are going to come in and sue the city looking for repayment in some form or fashion.
Commissioner Zerdy, I know you had a question a while back.
I just wanted to say that I think everybody's here because you're looking for some fair way, right? Something that's fair. And if you look at, we talked about these roads, a number of them that have never been paved. They probably would cost the most. But they're in areas that have the least amount of value in the properties adjacent to them. So what would be fair if you would assess the maximum on properties that have the minimum value? That's a challenge for us to look at that kind of a relationship. And I guess the question of trust that gets brought up, we rely on staff, we rely on consultants, we rely on as much information, and the data that Ms. Pand is asking for can be put online. There's GIS, it is online. Maybe we'll have to help you make it a little easier to access on the website. But we're talking about what kind of formula, what kind of a way, a hybrid. I own one, I have a Toyota Prius. But what kind of a hybrid solution is there? And most likely there may be some kind of a mix here that's different. But we wouldn't be having this kind of a conversation when we looked at these things for a period of pretty close to 30 months altogether. And I can tell you it's undaunting to look at all that information and try to digest it in the form of how do we present this. And I can tell you, I don't want to pay more taxes in my area. I picked up a house that was built in the late 20s, and I put in over $150,000 into a house that's not close to getting the money back right now that should be. And I'm feeling confident that it will be, because I'm not going anywhere. But it still is, what can we do? We all know that this type of a predicament has gone on for a while. So I think trying to find something that's fair. We're all on the same page. We're not trying to create something that is unfair. But that's what I think we're here tonight. And looking at all these different options, again, many of them have been brought up before. And these folks are here to give you the either legality of it or the probability of it. And I think as well as any of us here, that's our challenge. How do you come up with a formula that makes everybody happy, right? And somewhere in there, people are going to be happy, and some folks aren't. But we have to find a way where we can try to accomplish this in a manageable way that we can rally together as a city. Because, as you said, Mike, that there are maybe some people that would like to help more, but they aren't able to. So there's got to be some ways that we can all do this. So I apologize for being late here this evening. I had a conflict that I could not change, but I know it has been recorded. I'll listen to everybody's comments myself as well. But thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Mr. Pearl?
For the financial expert, I'm waiting for you to find out about, is it true what I've read and heard, and through the articles I've read online about the interest rates? Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's really 3 topics I wrote down that were financial aid questions that people did ask. One is level of interest rates, and you're correct. Interest rates are at all-time historic lows. There's been a lot of global unrest that drives people to Treasury investments. We're the safe haven still, despite what people think about the U.S. Treasury. So interest rates are near historic lows. I agree that shouldn't be the driver of why you do a bond deal, but if you do end up doing a bond deal because the need is there and this is the right financial solution, now is a very opportune time to be borrowing. It's the 10-year Treasury, I think, is about 1.85 or 1.9% right now. So it's very attractive. We did a municipal bond financing for an A-rated credit today. It was about a 20-year transaction, 2.7%. So interest rates are very attractive right now in terms of borrowing. So that was one question. Another question about phasing, if the city manager would like me to address that of the mayor. When we talked about the initial referendum, the plan was to phase projects in over a period of time. And there's a number of reasons why you would do that. Perhaps the most important is the IRS puts regulations on how quickly you must spend tax-exempt bond proceeds. So whenever you do a tax-exempt financing, the IRS is going to tell you have to have an expectation to spend those proceeds in 3 years. So there's a limit on how quickly you can spend the proceeds. So you wouldn't want to do a whole financing up front if you thought the projects were going to take 5 to 6 years to spend down. So we did intend to phase projects, and most people do phase projects over time. The other reason it's advantageous to do that, assuming you're in a rising property tax situation, is you don't take on the full brunt of the debt service up front. You phase it in over time, and thus you phase the millage impact in over time as well. So you combine that with phasing the debt service in with what you hope is a growing assessed value, and it limits the millage over time. Those are really the 2 reasons that we think phasing is a good idea with any project you might do. The other question that came up about how specific can the resolution or the referendum be in terms of projects? That's really at the city's discretion. Within the referendum language, there are word limits.